Hey Scott, how you doing? Thanks for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So just to get started, I'd love to just have you give a short introduction to yourself and kind of where you're coming at with your experience in sales leadership.
Yeah, sounds good. My name is Scott Taylor. I have been in sales for almost 35 years now. I've been in software sales for about the last 28 and software sales leadership for the last 12 to 13. I have worked in multiple environments, was part of VeriSign before its first stock split, part of WebEx before it was acquired by Cisco, part of Marketo before it went public. Really, really blessed in my career, I got to say.
Right. Really cool companies. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and
Great
the
company.
opportunity to work with some absolutely phenomenal salespeople, sales leaders, and then also other leaders within the organization. So, had a very blessed career so far, and looking to keep it going for a little while longer.
I'm sure you will. So I'd love to hear, as you've now been, VP of sales,
Mhm.
what would you say is like the most important leadership lesson that you've learned through your experience?
There have been quite a few, so it's going to be hard to prioritize. But if I can give you two,
Okay,
then I will.
two's good. Two's good.
The very first one is meet people where they are. Don't expect yourself from them and things of that nature. And then the other one is, show that appreciation. Be someone that is there for all of your team, and then understand that your team benefits from all of the other teams that come around it. Us in sales sometimes get on our high horse and forget that, but not for, these 50 other teams, these 100 other people, we wouldn't be able to do a thing.
So on that first lesson, I'd love to hear you talk about it just a little bit more. Where do you think people kind of go wrong with that first one?
Quite often, a person that is newly minted as a sales leader thinks of themselves first as a boss, and that's the first mistake. The second mistake is they were probably really, really good at sales naturally. All of this
Right.
really came to them like, no problem whatsoever. They've got the gift of gab, they can talk to anybody, they could sell ice to an Eskimo, etc. But some folks are pretty good at sales. They just need that nurturing and that coaching to get themselves to a better place. So you find out where they are, you understand what their strengths are, and you also understand their challenges. Put them into a position where their strengths are absolutely going to shine, and you try to coach to their challenges to see what you can do to bring them up. The best thing in the world is watching that light bulb go off over their head like, oh my God, I got it now. And you start to watch them regularly closing deals and helping their teammates bring deals in as well.
So when you talk about meeting people where they're at, you're mostly talking about really trying to understand where they are in their growth journey in sales.
Not only in their growth journey in sales, but them as a person.
Okay.
If you look at your team as numbers, you're bound to fail eventually. If you look at your team as people who have things that are going on in their lives, and understand what those things are, and find those common areas, you start to create a team that's an absolute beast, and other teams start to fear them.
I mean, that's interesting because I would say a lot of management structures around sales is about seeing your team as numbers, right? It's like you have quotas and,
Yeah.
the game's all about carrying quota. So, I mean, how do you do that?
Well, the number's the number, and it's always going to be there. It's always going to get bigger, and it's always going to be something that seems like it's almost impossible to get to. And you that's always in the background, but that's a
Right.
constant. And the lives of your team are always going to be changing. There's always going to be something net new, and if you're not paying attention to that, one of those things is going to pull a great teammate away from you, or
Mm.
send somebody that has the potential to be a great teammate away from you. But if you're meeting them where they are, as far as their lives are concerned, as far as their careers are concerned, I think it was Richard Branson that said it. Train them to be so great that it would be easy for them to leave you, but treat them so well that they don't want to.
Can you say that again? That sounded like an awesome quote.
Yeah. Again, it's not my quote. I believe it was Richard Branson from Virgin that said it. He wants you to train your people so well that they could easily leave you and
they
do
they
their.
could leave you because they're going to be awesome,
Yeah, but
but they
treat
don't
them
want
so
to.
well
Yeah.
that they don't want to.
I like it. Love it. That's a great quote. I hadn't heard that one before.
Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about kind of what are the mistakes or what do people get wrong. I like to
Mhm.
just, you've probably in your own experience made mistakes as a sales leader or as a sales manager, but you probably also in promoting as a VP of sales, you promoted sales manager. What
Mhm.
are some of the main mistakes or maybe ways that people get this wrong? You talked about one is treating people just like the numbers or just focusing on the numbers. What are some other patterns you've seen?
I often tell teams that I've been part of, the reason why I have director or manager or VP or whatever my title has been, the reason why I have that is because I've screwed up a hell of a lot more times than you guys have.
Just
So
made more mistakes.
I made way more mistakes and I've been doing it
Yeah.
for longer, so that's how I got here. But,
Yeah.
I think that the biggest mistake is one that I touched on a little bit earlier. A lot of times that person that gets promoted to a sales manager was a phenomenal salesperson, but was probably naturally a great one. And they expect themselves from their team. And when they do that, they put the team in a really, really bad position because it's like, I can't be you. If I could be you, I would have been beating you when you were my teammate or something along those lines.
And
That's
when you say they expect their team to be themselves, is that like in the way that they approach sales, or in what ways?
yeah, in their approach, in their style, the words that they say, because that really naturally great salesperson can say something, and somebody else that tried to say that would offend a customer.
Like if they have what do people call it, the Riz? If the Riz is so strong, they can get
There
away
you
with
go.
things
There
or
you go.
whatever.
I had a sales rep that was so good. How good was he? That he actually, in the middle of some of his qualification calls, in some of his discovery, he's sending the contract to the customer.
Oh,
I mean, if he's talking to a CEO or somebody that has power, he's sending it during discovery.
wow, that's amazing.
I was actually listening down the road from him, and I heard the customer say, "Did you just send me the contract?" And he said, "Yeah, I did." And the guy
Why
said,
not?
"Yeah," the guy said, "Nice." That was a one call close. Now, I also had another rep on the team that tried that, but she unfortunately offended the customer.
Yeah,
And
right,
She
right,
she had to play catch up. So, you can't do everybody can't do the exact same thing.
right.
Why I'm one of those leaders that I shy away from scripts and I get more into talking points. Because if you give somebody a script that is a little nervous, that maybe is a little uncomfortable, or, not that star, they are going to start to stumble a little bit. And then the customer picks up on that. You know what? This person doesn't really know what they're talking about. Are they that trusted advisor I'm looking for? And, it creates a rocky road.
Interesting. On this point of giving talking points, not scripts, I'm curious because I think there's one which I tend to agree with this line of thinking in sales management, which is you want to create enough structure and process where most people, even if they're not amazing at sales, can come in and hit quota or get close to quota. But at the
100%.
same time, like you said, you also want to create enough space for people to be authentic and exercise their individual strengths. Any
Yeah.
thoughts on like how to strike that balance and how do you approach that? Like little tips, tricks, stuff like that?
The world of sales has been given an amazing gift, and it is the gift that I call MedPick that everybody has heard about.
Right.
This process, and that is a phenomenal foundation for building the skills of sales, because sales at the end of the day is the combination of art and science. You have to give them enough science to where they have the fundamentals and that foundation is set. But you also want to make sure that they have enough artistry, they have enough ability to, connect with their customer, that they can take them through that process, and the customer feels as though they've been on this journey. Everywhere I've been, there's been a few companies that I've worked for where, a couple of folks is like, Scott, you're always talking about that kind of thing. But if you grab somebody from, the demand gen section of your sales process, and you carry them on a journey all the way through their third renewal, they feel as though there's a connection there that is so much tighter than anything that any other company can do, and that's building that moat that you hear a lot of sales leaders talk about. I want to build a
Yeah.
moat around our company, and I want alligators and sharks with lasers on their heads and all that to keep people away. This is what does that, is when you can connect with your customer, but also you truly learn about them, their needs and their company needs as they move forward. You've got somebody that's going to stick with you for a while, as long as you're treating them right and you are providing them with a viable product.
I like that. So one thing is using something like MedPick, a sales methodology, to make sure that you're creating the foundation, balancing the art and science. I like that. So getting back to these like mistakes, so or anti-patterns, whatever you want to call them. One is trying to coach people to be like themselves instead of giving them space to be themselves. What's anything else in that general question of like things where you kind of see sales managers potentially being counterproductive in how they approach their leadership or their management?
Yeah, the other is not making sure that their team is intimately connected to their internal teammates. A lot of times a new business seller will sell a deal and throw it over the wall. And, they barely got that deal in. They didn't do a proper discovery. There's no notes. in the CRM. There's nothing for the integration team or the onboarding team, whatever the case may be, in post
Customer
sales
success, what, yeah, post
to
sales.
grab onto and make sure that this journey continues for the customer in as great of way as it possibly can be. So if you're not putting together that nice dossier for post sales to take on, the customer experience can start to dwindle, and that's how you start to have churn after that first year. They're not going to renew because they had a bad experience coming out of the gate.
That's really interesting. I love that point about how it's, it can be really, with all the pressure of quota and stuff, you can really focus a lot on just sales, but you're really just the entry point of the customer journey. And if you're not helping the people who come behind you, customer success, onboarding, to really understand the needs of this customer, you're ultimately failing. Now, the question is, is there a comp plan that incentivizes that or not? That's a different story. But
Right.
still, to do what's right by the customer, that's the right thing to do. I'm curious, just to pull one of those threads, this idea of like a handoff to customer success.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you think are like critical to have in that handoff, and what does that dossier consist of to really like make sure that handoff is seamless and successful?
It has to have who are they going to be talking to. Like there have been some times where the new business seller is only talking to the primary user or maybe even the decision maker on the customer side, but they don't have who on IT is going to handle the implementation.
Interesting.
Who may be the primary user, or they may have just the primary user and not their team. So the person that is setting all of this up internally within your company has no idea who they're going to be talking to or the personalities also, because that's something key to have as well. Because if you've got somebody that is type A or maybe somebody that's a little flighty, or if they don't know that information, then as a new business seller, you are now forcing post sales to do discovery for you so that this
Right.
journey can continue on. And actually, that means that the deal was now sold by post sales, not by pre sales.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I had this deal that I recently sold where we had a very strong champion, and this champion made the deal just so easy to sell because they were motivated. There was a little bit of a past relationship, and so it caused me to skip a bunch of corners or skip steps, cut corners. I mixed my idioms there, and we closed the deal. It looks good, all's going on, and then like 6 months later, I get notice that they're churning, and I'm like, why? What's going on? And essentially, because the deal was so easy to sell, I didn't really do my diligence on who are the other stakeholders,
Right.
and because we were actually selling to the VP of sales, and they had the power to just kind of make it happen. But it
Yes.
turns out that there was important stakeholders in customer success and an important stakeholder in one salesman, one that I didn't even touch base with. I didn't really know their needs and what their actual like must-haves were. And so we just kind of overlooked it, assuming the champion would just carry it through. But
Yeah.
ultimately, the champion got enough pushback from that one sales manager and from the customer success person where he's like, hey, I was really excited to do this, but ultimately we're just going to go back to this other solution. It's not
Yeah.
really worth the pain at this point. And I felt so dumb. I was like, oh my gosh, I knew I should have done, more discovery, figured out who are the other critical people here for this, solution to be implemented. Because that's the
Yeah.
thing, like, it's not just about getting them to commit to your solution. You then have to successfully onboard, have them engage, and ultimately solve the problem and deliver value. In my opinion, like if your account doesn't get all the way to the point where you're delivering value, then I don't think you're successful. Like I think oftentimes in sales we like think, hey, they committed, we got the contract signed, like I closed the deal, I won. To me,
Absolutely.
it's like that's not where the win is. The win is fully onboarded, happy customer is the win. But I know it's maybe hard to get all salespeople to think like that.
Well, the crazy thing is, I mean, we love that low barrier to entry. We love, that nice, greasy way into getting a deal done. But what can happen is if you don't go through those steps, which again is why I love MedPick, if you don't go through those steps, then you run into that potential 6 month churn or the non-renewal at the end of the year. But the key is if you've done that, if you've done those things, if you've gone through all of those additional steps and you found out who all of the stakeholders are or potentially your opponents through the process, you've now created a customer that you can go back to 90 days later once they're really really successful and say, why don't you refer me to a few of your business associates that you think could benefit from this? You're building business off of that one deal, as opposed to getting that deal in, throwing it over the wall, and running for the next one.
Yeah, wow, that's great stuff. So, want to change gears a little bit here from kind of mistakes to kind of more positive
Yeah.
practices. But before I do, I got to ask you, your shirt Alpha Phi Alpha. Tell me about
Yes,
it.
sir.
I'm just curious.
Yeah. So Alpha Phi Alpha is a fraternity I joined when I was in college, but
Oh, nice.
Unlike some fraternities where, some people ask, hey, what school was that? No, this is a worldwide organization. And when you join, you're in for life. So once you've graduated from college, you actually join what's called an alumni chapter. And you don't supervise the undergrad chapters, but you do work with them to make sure they've got all the things that they need. And I'm actually the Northern California intake,
Amazing.
so
That's
to
so
speak.
cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I love it. They didn't have Greek life at my university, so I missed out on the opportunity to join a fraternity. It's a bummer.
Yeah. We are everywhere, and we are the oldest Black intercollegiate fraternity
Oh
in existence.
wow.
So, founded in 1906, and have been going strong ever since.
Oh, that's amazing. Thanks for telling me about that. I was just curious. I love it.
Absolutely.
I assumed it was fraternity, but it's like, yeah, you don't usually see, people with your experience wearing a fraternity shirt. So it makes
Yeah.
sense now that you explain the
Yeah.
story. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, tell me, like, I'd love to hear. One of the things I just noticed when I as I've seen the things you share, it's like you're
Hmm.
very focused on leadership.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to get into the semantics of like what's management versus leadership, but to me, like one of the things that's very clear to me as I see your approach is that it's about people.
Hmm.
And I'm not saying you're not focused at all about like management and comp plans and et cetera, and pipeline reviews, et cetera. But it seemed to me like a lot of it is like there's a foundational layer of leadership that you have to nail first. Then you can get into all these management tactics. And so I want to hear first if you agree with that, and then second of all, like what do you think are some of the most important practices as a sales leader to kind of nail that leadership foundation before you kind of focus on all the tactical management things?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Because while you can, again, the number's the number, it sits out there, it's massive and it grows. All of the reports and all of the stuff that you can look at to see how the team is performing, those are all phenomenal. But if you actually are connecting with the people and you get them on board with your vision, then you don't have to work as hard as most managers and leaders do to get
Right.
them pace with you because they're feeling it. They're bought into your philosophy. So that's like they're now sitting there. Okay, tell me where we need to go, and I'm ready. I'm ready to walk on broken glass soaked in alcohol because I believe in what you're talking about, or I've watched you do it. Because that's another thing that some sales leaders tend to do. They step back and just send their team out. But if
Right.
you're you pick up a bag too and you grab a couple of deals and you're working them, and then every now and then you just drop off a contract to a rep like, hey, Merry Christmas, you just closed XYZ Corporation for $20,000 ARR. What name a salesperson that's not now, that's my guy, I'm doing whatever he says
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that so
yeah.
much.
So that's kind of the beginning. And then as you start to implement the other pieces, which are the reports, which are the goals, which is the go-to-market strategy and all those other things, you have to involve the team in those things. As an example, in my time at Rollworks, which I just recently left Rollworks, there's a sales rep there, a gentleman named Ryan Loveman, who's mean, I love that guy to death. Phenomenal salesperson, and he's like employee number 40. Been there forever, been there, done that, knows
Wow.
the business inside and out. I have to look at him like a partner because I'm learning from him about the
Right,
business.
right, right.
I'm
You
coaching
might
him.
have the title, but there's a lot of things that he can help you out with.
100%. So as we're talking about net new things for go-to-market strategy, as we're talking about, implementing some, net new skill or tip or trick, I'm talking to Ryan. Ryan, how do you feel about this? And Ryan will say, that's pretty good. I don't really like that. And, if it's something that we have to do no matter what, then I got to get Ryan on board with me, which, goes back to that meeting Ryan where he is and getting him to understand the philosophy. Or, Ryan may have some input that tells us that is completely the wrong direction to go in. Gotcha, Ryan. Thank you for that input, and then I can go back to the
Yeah.
executive meeting saying, okay, guys, this is what we're talking about now. Again, I may not bring up Ryan's name specifically, but I could say the team had some concerns around this, and sometimes some folks in senior leadership can say, well, why are we talking with the team so early about it? Well, the team's who's going to execute it. The team's who's on the front line. And if they're uncomfortable with it when I spring it on them 2 days before they're supposed to implement it, that's a problem. But if they're
Yeah.
with us through the planning process, then they also feel ownership in it, and they're going to execute at that much higher of a level because they were part of the process.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's, to me, that's something I actually had an experience with today where we wanted to change some policies, and there's part of you that's always like you want to be decisive and just make the change and
Yeah,
move on or whatever. But
yeah,
I was like, I probably should seek some feedback on some of these changes, and so I just had like 4 or 5 huddles this morning, and it's interesting because part of it, it's like it's always, I think, a little uncomfortable. One of the things it's a little vulnerable as a leader to seek out feedback, because there might be the case where like you heard them, but you're still going to make the decision, and that
Mm-hmm.
can be uncomfortable. Like, but then there's other cases where like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I didn't think about that. I'm going to actually change my plan or change what we're doing because of that feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I think it's always it's always a balance and like a culture you need to build, or at least we try to build, where it's like, hey, I'm always going to listen,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not always going to implement exactly what you're saying, but it will always be considered. And so, and I think if that's clear, and obviously if you always ask for feedback and never listen, like never implement what they say,
That's the problem. Yeah.
it's a problem for sure. So yeah, so anyway, this like basically is like I had like 4 or 5 conversations. Overall, the conversations were positive about the change, but one person had some very significant concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Like 3 of his 5 concerns I agreed with, and was like, okay, we can adjust this. But 2 of them I was like, like, sorry, this is still the right call.
Right.
So now I have to go talk to him and say, hey, here's why, like I understand maybe you still don't disagree, but I still appreciate if you support it. And so it takes a little bit of extra work and vulnerability as a leader. But I think it's all, in my experience, it's almost always better than just being like command and control, which I think can create resentment.
100%. I always like to have that conversation early, even when there's nothing on the table. Hey,
Mm,
there's going to
yeah,
be when something comes down the pipe that I've got nothing to do with. I don't even agree with it, but we've got to do it. So we've got to go at that at 100%. And if we feel it's not going to work, we have to prove that it doesn't work, as opposed to just saying it's not going to work.
right.
And then there's times where we can do some pushback, but
Yeah,
understand, I'm in this with you as we're exploring this thing that maybe is a little unpalatable for everybody. And then
right.
there's going to be some times where I'm going to make it an executive decision. That's just it, and we've got to go for it. And I need you guys to trust me.
Yeah. I like it. So to wrap up a little bit, one thing that I notice you talk a lot about is appreciating your team and kindness. And these are things that I think you don't hear a lot about when you're
Mhm.
talking about sales management. I'm curious, I'd love to just hear from you why you think these are so important in general, but it's specifically in sales.
Yeah, this is something that I started as an individual contributor, as a salesperson, and I had an SDR that was absolutely phenomenal. I'm hoping that they eventually get to see this if they're not watching it live, because they did note that I'm going to be
Oh,
here today.
nice.
Um, as an individual contributor sales rep, I had what I called Scott Club. So there was President's Club that sales reps get to go to, but not everybody gets to participate in that.
Mm.
The SDR that found me the biggest deal that I closed that year, I sent them to Vegas for a weekend.
You did just as an AE?
Yeah, as an AE, I sent them
I
and
love
I
that. That's awesome.
Vegas for a weekend. I paid for them to get a show. I paid for them to get a really really nice dinner, and I
Nice.
had to pick them up from the airport and take them back to the airport.
Wow. Very cool.
Now you're talking. I mean, back in the day, you're talking. That's probably a $2,500, $3,000 weekend. But what was my commission check on a deal that I closed that was maybe $2 million?
I mean, much more than that, right? It's not even close. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what is that SDR going to do for me, or all the other SDRs that get a chance to work with me going to do based on that?
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely going to put in more effort and try to help you
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
yes. I mean, it's a really really small investment for a massive massive return. And when you're showing that kind of appreciation, it works. Now, the next layer of appreciation is for all of the teams that are around sales. Every time I've walked in the door to a new organization and they've introduced me, I tell everybody that I'm talking to or that's part of that all hands, welcome to the sales team, because every single individual within an organization is part of the sales team in some way shape or form. You're selling this organization to somebody. You're either helping me
Mm,
in sales
yeah.
do it,
Yeah.
or when you're out and about and you've got your company t-shirt on, hey, tell me more about that company. Or you're sitting there with your family, where are you working nowadays? You're selling something in some way shape or form. So while you might not feel it, I need you to understand that you're part of it. And the only way that I can truly make sure that you're part of it is you get some of that benefit. So buying lunch for the onboarding team, sending, edible arrangement to marketing or something like that. These are really, really small areas of appreciation that have
Mm,
massive return. There are people that are in other departments that always, they always loved me because I'm taking care of them, and I'm always asking of them. I'm never telling them they need to do something, and I'm even asking their opinion on some of the things as I'm going about it. And if they tell me there's something that they need, like I know our deal desk when I was at Marketo, you had to close a deal a certain way. You had to bring them a certain package, otherwise there was a lot of work for them. So I'm checking with them as I'm checking all my boxes off. Is this right? Okay, now I'm going to submit, closed one,
Right.
not until that point, so that they have all of the things that they need to be able to do their job easier. Because I get paid way more than they do just because I get commission.
Right. Right.
And I can't get my commission if they're not able to do their job properly. So show that appreciation all the way around, show that kindness all the way around, and it really comes back to you like tenfold. Like again, that Vegas weekend, that same SDR who eventually became a very, very good sales rep, but that same SDR, told everybody about that phenomenal weekend. So
Yeah.
now all the SDRs are asking the SDR manager to be assigned to me. Or
Right. Right.
they're trying
Yeah.
to find me a deal because they know I'm going to send them to Vegas that next year. So
That's
it's
awesome. I,
yeah,
I I
it's
love that.
yeah.
And one thing that stands out to me is that when you're talking about showing appreciation, you're talking a lot about actions, right? It's like, I think, I'm not saying it's bad to verbally appreciate people. Hey, thanks for doing that. I appreciate it. But it seems to me that there's another level, which is actions speak louder than words. Does that sound right?
100%. The words are great, and when you're in those all hands and you're recognizing somebody and they get a chance, to puff their chest out a little bit because they're being appreciated. But when you do that next step, like for Christmas last year, myself and the sales manager that rolled up to me bought the entire solution consultants team their favorite alcohol.
Oh, nice. I like
And
that.
I'm not talking about, if you like whiskey, I got you whiskey. I'm talking about I'm getting you the top shelf stuff and sending it out to your house. In fact, the leader of the solution consultants team at Rollworks, where I was, has been my best friend for the last 20 years. So I actually engraved bottles of his favorite whiskey. And then
Wow.
for his teammates, again, I went to find whatever is the top tier of what they like. That's what we went in to go find. Now, I think we might have spent about 500 or $600, but we did more than 22 million in revenue. So,
Yeah.
it pays for itself in the long run,
Yeah,
always.
that's so great. Where would you say you've, besides your own experiences, where would you say what's helped you learn leadership lessons in leadership, like books or people, role models? Just curious what.
So I read all the books, but I do not appreciate someone that operates from the book. I get the experiences and then add those experiences to the book and then make something happen. But the first layer is my father. My father was a lieutenant colonel in the army.
Okay.
And
Wow.
as an army, I wasn't an army brat, so I wasn't bouncing around to all the different bases. And I salute all the people who do that because I can't even imagine what my life would have
Oh,
been
so
like that.
hard.
I did still have that military father, and yeah, he actually just passed away a month ago tomorrow. So
Oh, condolences.
thank you, but big credit to him in that those are some of the foundational things for me in learning of what a leader is and how a leader operates. So I got to see that as a young child, and ended up being in leadership positions very young. Like I worked at Foot Locker a long time ago, but I was one of the youngest managers in the history of the company at 18 years old, managing a store. So it was, these are
Wow.
things that have worked out very well for me. But to get into books, the qualified sales manager, John McMahon, phenomenal book. Dare to Lead by Brene Baer, phenomenal book. Atomic Habits, James
Oh, I love
Clear.
that book. That's a,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then to go really, kind of, esoteric with, the Alchemist. Amazing book. As
Interesting.
old as it is, it still is something that you can pull things from to be able to not only lead, but lead with care, lead with purpose, and to lead your people to an actual goal. If you're doing those types of things, if again, if you're showing them that you care, you've got a clear vision, you've painted that picture for them, and then you treat them like leaders. I tell all of the reps that I've ever worked with, look, you're the CEO of your territory, you're the CEO of your firm, you're the CEO of whatever that may be. You just happen to have a parent company, which is the manager you report to, and they've got a parent company, which is me.
Right.
I've got a parent company, which is the CEO, and they've got a parent company, which is the
Their
stockholder.
board and stockholders. Yeah.
Whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. If you run it like it's a business that you own, you take higher ownership of it, and you also operate at a little bit higher level.
I love
Um,
that.
and it puts people in a different position.
Cool. Well, as we wrap up, we'd love just to hear where can people find you if they want to connect or learn more from you?
Yeah, right now I'm on LinkedIn is the easiest way that you're going to be able to
Cool.
reach me, and it's J Scott Taylor. That's how you'll be able to find me there. I'm looking forward to connecting with as many people as possible. I love to have these types of conversations, and I am currently looking for a job. So if you're looking for a sales leader that truly cares not only about the bottom line for the company, but the people within it, at least let's have a conversation.
Amazing. Well, Scott, it was fantastic to connect, and I appreciate the chat.
Really appreciate it, Jeff. You have a great one.
Okay, likewise.